Welcome to the latest version of Lexington Remembers. My name is Dan Fenn, and I'm an occasional interviewer and host for this series, which has been going 5, 6, 7 years now. We have about 40 or more interviews, which are available at the Cary Library and the Historical Society. And this one I've been particularly looking forward to because we're talking about the Lexington Symphony. I think it was when I was a selectman, and it was pretty new, the symphony, and called the Sinfionietta in those days. And I thought I should go, it's a Lexington thing, and I had some responsibilities in town. I didn't go with any particular hopes. And I left that evening and that concert just thrilled. This was then and is even more so now a real jewel in our community. Not so well known then, very well known now. And we have with us today Maestro Jonathan McPhee, who's the music director, and Liz Whitfield, the long-term concert mistress. And I think I've read that you have a program coming up this year.
We do. We're starting off our season September 10th and doing actually 3 pieces on the program. The first piece is a piece by Paul McCartney called Spiral. So anybody who remembers the Beatles, this is one of his classical pieces. We're also featuring a young up-and-coming pianist named Gavin George, who's at the ripe age of 13 already has international management, and he's quite an amazing player. He'll be doing the Ravel Piano Concerto, and then I think it's Schubert 5.
Schubert 5.
Yeah.
Which I'm looking forward to particularly. I think it was on my Let's Play This list because the players get to make suggestions for programming, and occasionally your piece gets picked, and I've had Schubert 5 on the list for quite a while. I'm looking forward to it.
That's great, and you've been a little peripatetic, but it's at Cary Hall.
It's at Cary Hall.
At what time?
8 p.m.
Pre-concert.
8 o'clock, and then you do a talk beforehand.
Yeah, so there's a pre-concert talk at 7 o'clock, and I sort of give, high points to look at for the concert. So if you're looking for more information on the composers or the piece, that's always a good thing to come to.
Now, that hall's usually pretty full. If somebody wants to go, getting a ticket might not be a bad idea, right?
Yeah, go early, get your ticket. Actually, you can either call 781-523-9009 or just go to the website, and there's a little spot that says Lexington Symphony Tickets. Click on that and you can pick your seat.
Now, what was that phone number again if I want a ticket?
781-523-9009.
Say good teamwork.
Well, it better be. It'd be a lousy concert if they weren't. And so what else have you got planned for this year?
One of the high points for me is part 2 of something we started last season. So one of the ideas that was in the back of my head for decades, literally, since I was a student at the Royal Academy, was to take Wagner's Ring Cycle, which is 4 operas and about 18 hours of music, and to scrunch it down into 2 evenings, so that it goes back to when I was at the Academy. They ran a Ring Cycle over a weekend at Covent Garden, where they actually ran all 4 back to back.
Wow.
They changed conductors, soloists, orchestra members, and the audience got these box lunches. It was the worst case of jet lag I've ever had in my life when I came out of it. And I thought, there are so many places within Wagner's Ring that people actually know the music. I mean, for me, it was the revelation that most of this music I heard for the first time was watching Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of it that shows up in What's Up, Doc at the Opera. And today, there's so many things that have permeated our society that came from the Ring. For example, Star Wars. John Williams builds the score for Star Wars exactly the way Wagner pioneered it, where each character has their own theme. You can tell, even if you shut your eyes, what's going on in the movie by whose theme you hear and who's doing what to whom. So it's either a place, an emotion, or a person that is identified by these themes. So anyway, we finished last season with part 1, and we had an international cast of singers, many of whom sing at the Met, who sang part 1, and we stuffed Cary Hall. We did 2 performances, one at Cary Hall and one up in Nashua, because we put the 2 orchestras together so that we would have the full Wagner orchestration, which is a massive orchestra. I did cheat in one spot. We didn't have 19 anvil players. We only had 4. But
not too many anvil players around.
No, not only that, but carrying those big pieces of metal around and banging on them.
But I can't imagine if we had 19, because just having 3
was
loud enough.
Yeah, but fun. 19 would have been tough.
And I think the second part starts with the anvil.
It does. You get a little bit, but they're not all of them. It's just a little echo from the other room. So part 1 was Das Rheingold and Die Walkür, and part 2 starts out with Siegfried and goes into Götterdämmerung, and that's in October 1st here in Lexington and October 2nd. And again, we've got an amazing cast of singers who sing in the big opera houses.
Why Nashua?
Because of the orchestra that we're partnering with is Symphony New Hampshire, which is based in Nashua.
And that's yours too?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, we'll get to that. So that sounds like a very dramatic show. And then after that, then what have you got?
I have to look at my cheat sheet.
Then we have our annual Holiday Pops concert, which I think is about 6 or 7 years old now, and was originally built around Holiday Shoppers Night, as it used to be called. I think it's now called Holiday Festival Night. And so we have a kids concert in the afternoon at 4. And then a family adult concert at 7:30.
And that, what day again?
December the 2nd, that one is.
Yes.
Friday.
First Friday in December.
Okay.
And Santa Claus comes, of course.
Yeah. I remember that one well, because when you suggested it and I was still on the board, I thought it was a terrible idea.
That's right. I forgot that.
Remember?
Yeah. Now, Dan, did you realize, looking at that from 2 years, because we did one concert that year.
Yeah.
And everybody was afraid that it was going to take people away from Shoppers Day, when in fact it brought more people in.
I thought they'd be down there and they wouldn't. But I was dead wrong, wasn't I?
Well, but we had a
once in your life, right?
Yeah.
But we had a surprise in that too, because that first year we did the one concert, and then it was the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Association said, "Gee, can you do 2 concerts on the same day?" So we said, "Okay, next year we'll do a second concert." We did the 4 o'clock performance. We thought they were going to be the same concert. We did the same program. And we were totally shocked to see that there were about 5 kids under the age of 6 for every adult who showed up. It was a massive, small kids audience.
Wonderful.
And Santa Claus came out and was standing next to me, and it was like watching, a sand picture. Yeah. All the little kids came down out of the balcony and started heading towards the stage to get to Santa Claus. And it was a mad scene. He was backing up, and I kept going, "Nice Santa, nice Santa." And he's going, "Oh, how do I get out? How do I get out?"
Where's my reindeer when I need them?
So,
That's funny.
unbeknownst to us, the community, and this is sort of one of the key themes about Lexington Symphony, the community showed us what they wanted, what they needed. So ever since then, we know that the 4 o'clock is the kiddie matinee, so we changed the program slightly for the kids. It's shorter, has different selections in it. And, then the evening pops is more of full traditional family pops, but Santa makes his big entrance, and especially designed exit now at the kids' pops.
Yeah. I remember the only thing, I got the ballet, I don't know if you were involved in it, to perform at the Kennedy Library as a Christmas present to the community. And I guess you were there at the time.
I think I was emceeing it, actually.
And all the kids with their chins on the platform watching the dancers.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And then just as you were finishing, started to snow out there.
Oh.
And the snow was coming down. You could see it through that great
Big glass
but-
atrium. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Spectacular. So Christmas is the end, or do you do more?
Oh, we do a lot
actually,
more.
We're also invited to do a Pops concert in Burlington. I don't know if we should
Really?
mention that on this program, but yes, so the following 2 days later, we go to Burlington, do the same Family Pops concert at the high school there.
Wow.
So they're trying to create a music program there, so it's fun to support another community.
And I should mention that we're featuring the New England tenors. So you've seen the 3 Irish tenors, and you've seen the 3 tenors with Placido Domingo. This is the 3 New England tenors, and they're spectacular. You can YouTube the New England tenors, and you can see a sample of what they do.
Wow, and when's that? That's
December 4th. That's a Sunday afternoon.
Burlington.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the spring?
Well, before we get to the spring, we have one of my favorite concerts, which is not a public concert, but it's our Orchestrating Kids Through Classics kids program.
How does that work? Petting zoo?
No petting zoo. For each of the schools that comes to the program, we send a group of 4 musicians to each school. We do a 45-minute program during the first 2 weeks of January, just to talk about the families of instruments in the orchestra, talk about how to behave at a concert and what to expect. And then all the schools come to Cary Hall.
Benjamin Britten stuff.
No, we don't play Benjamin Britten. We actually, in the main concert, we start with Star Wars.
Ah, of course.
And we grab their attention. We play the opening bars of Star Wars, and then the whole orchestra leaves the stage. And then Jonathan narrates. He talks about how the orchestra grew back from early beginnings, from monks chanting from recorders to the big symphony orchestra we have today, and we end playing a larger portion of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So we hit Bach and Haydn and Mozart and Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky along the way.
It's like
And,
Stravinsky, too.
Yeah.
What did they do with Stravinsky?
well, it's funny. We ask for feedback from the schools, and some of the kids write these wonderful, wonderful notes.
And these are Lexington schools.
Oh, Lexington, Burlington, Waltham,
Really?
Winchester, Bedford.
No
We've
kidding.
had schools from Somerville and Dorchester, Medford. Any school that will come. Lincoln is coming this year, and Sudbury, and
Wow,
yeah.
that's terrific. And that's
That's in January.
okay.
Yeah.
But if I bought a season ticket, right, it wouldn't include that.
No. That program has got, well, besides the fact that we cover the entire history of Western music in 1 hour from 900 AD to today.
Okay.
There's two things that I think are really special about the program. One is, as we change the orchestra, kids get to hear how the orchestra sounds different through the ages. And they also get to to meet because of the in-school program that Liz does with musicians. They really get an idea of what the different instruments are, and being third graders, they're at the right age to choose what instrument they would like to pick up. So it's a great inspirational way of introducing somebody to an instrument that piques their interest that they're going to study. And the other aspect of it for me, which is really exciting, is that not only are we tracing how the orchestra grows or grew throughout history, but the other side of that is, for a composer, how does the addition of these instruments and the sounds stimulate their creative thinking, so that you can look at what Stravinsky does in Rite of Spring and look at what Bach did in his day, and as the toolkit changes, it sparks different kinds of ideas that come out of it. So it really does focus on the creative end of how you as a human being conceive an idea or a sound or a picture that you want to express, and now you've got all these instruments to be able to do it, and how that changes over history.
And the existence of the tools means just the fact that I've got these extra tools to work with changes what the musician does.
All of a sudden you hear a new instrument and you go, where can I put that sound in my thinking? And you think, oh, English horn, well, that's different. Why don't we think about what an English horn can sound like and how it can affect you?
Yeah.
So we've had wonderful comments from all the adults that also attend as parents or teachers, and we have talked for a few years about doing the same program for an adult audience, and we would have to change really very little. So it's on our wish list, which always seems to grow.
That's good.
We have a large wish list.
That's good. Okay, and then?
Oh, then we have a strings-only concert, which we're doing. The main piece is going to be Dvorak's Serenade, which is a wonderful, lush, romantic piece. And what else is on that program?
Not the American.
David Diamond's Rounds for Strings, who was my teacher at Juilliard.
And the Janicek Idyll, or Idylla, which I've never played. So I'm looking forward to the string program. That will be fun. It's always nice when we don't have the rest of the instruments around as a string player. And then we have, Dvorak again, the New World Symphony in April.
I think I've heard it.
April 1. You think you've heard that?
Oh,
I bet you have. Talking about
Many
English
times.
horn, that's where the English horn comes into his or her
One of the great audition pieces for an English horn player.
And I heard that, although it's called From the New World, actually it's a collection of folk songs from his homeland. That it really isn't American.
What, New World? No, it's actually a lot of the melodies were inspired by his time here, because Dvorak was in the United States.
Well, I
at that
know
point.
he wrote it here, but I thought I'd read somewhere that although he calls it From the New World, it was his country's folk music.
No, not the New World Symphony. That's why it was called New World. No,
Okay.
in fact, the inspiration for that was while he was in New York City, he was given the responsibility of teaching a new generation of American composers to be American composers. And he had latched on the idea that Negro spirituals were really what should be our music, which of course started a whole debate. And in fact, the debate raged large between Boston composers and New York composers, sort of like what happened with the baseball teams. But there was this whole big thing. So in New York, he was saying, the Negro spirituals are the basis of the new American compositional palette. And the Bostonians were saying, no, that doesn't make any sense. There are other things that are indigenous, like American Indian music.
Yeah.
But that famous da 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 bum ba da da.
Was that a spiritual?
Yes.
Was it?
Yeah.
He was in Iowa at the time?
No, New York City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But he was in Iowa, wasn't he?
He was in Iowa. He actually traveled across.
Why would anybody go to Iowa?
It's good ice cream.
Yeah.
Whitey's.
No, he wanted to see America, so he went west, and I think he went as far as Iowa, and then turned around and came back.
Yeah.
Oh, too bad. He missed the best bit.
I know. The mountains loomed large, and he never went over it. But I mean, I'll have to fact check that. But I'm pretty sure he didn't go farther west than Iowa.
But
It's really wonderful stuff, I think I hear it more and more now. I think he's become more and more popular, and people more and more interested in him.
Yeah, he really is a pivotal composer, and that program that has two Czech composers, Dvorak and Janacek, even though they overlapped in dates, Dvorak has had a much broader appeal than Janacek, and Janacek is the one who feels more contemporary, even though the two were writing very similarly, historically at the same time.
It's fascinating. And is that it for the year?
Oh no. This is a long season. Then we have the Community Music Festival.
We shouldn't leave out our featured composer, though, also. On the program with the New World Symphony, a Lexington composer, Barris Parker, who's actually Turkish-American. And I just was introduced to his music in the last couple of years. Excellent composer. We're including a piece of his on that same program. So it's that program is sort of pictures of the world as far as Dvorak looking at the New World, and we now have Barris Parker, who's Turkish but has come to the New World and written his piece, and they all have very strong images, I think, when you listen to them. So your reaction to Dvorak's New World Symphony, the appeal that it has, the fact that it captures your imagination, all the pieces on that program, including Barris Parker's, do that. They're very appealing with strong images.
And he lives in town.
He does.
Yeah, great.
How wonderful.
Okay.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So the next concert is the Community Music Festival, followed by movie night, or music from the movies. And Jonathan developed the Community Music Festival last season, where we had groups of area musicians. I think they were all musical groups, weren't they? Performing at Carey Hall in the afternoon.
Music and dance.
Music and dance. And we had a wonderful array of musicians, from kids playing strings to 4 wonderful Indian musicians. I don't remember what their instruments were called. They were massive.
Honestly don't know the names of those either.
No.
And this was on my wish list for about 4 years as well. We sort of took a couple of different ideas. One is every other year we were doing a kids workshop, and Liz was the mastermind behind the workshop. So we would have a instrument petting zoo and do different activities with the kids. They would, learn to conduct a string quartet or something like that. And we wanted to find a way to do that every year. In the process of being here for 10 years, I've been aware that Lexington has a population that has changed a lot in the last several decades.
Sure has.
And as a result, there are these pockets within the Lexington area of different cultures.
Deep pockets, big pockets.
Yeah, and they tend to be somewhat either, I don't want to really say insular, but one group doesn't necessarily know that the other group exists. So what we were trying to do as an organization was to find a way to explore cross-fertilization of these groups. And that's where the workshop going into this music festival and going out and finding some of these groups. So we've got, the SNAP chorus, which is children with disabilities who sing in a chorus. We've got this the Guzhang Chinese ensemble that's here, the Indian music and dance ensemble, various young. The high school has several, everything from jazz ensemble, you name it.
Yeah, right.
There's a men's singing group that actually had a conflict and couldn't do it this past year, but they will be here this year. To try and get them all on one stage together, so as a free concert, people from the town can go in the space of an hour and a half, see a new group every 15 minutes.
That's, I think that's spectacular. We did for years something called LexFest with the same concept. We've got all these groups, and it involved ethnic foods as well as ethnic dances and games and sketches and music and everything.
Somebody told me about that, especially the food part.
Yeah.
And so one of the ideas is to, I don't know if we can get it together for this year, but to try and bring that back and put it to this too as well. So you have various cultures who show off their music, their dance, and their food. I mean, if that isn't a hit, I don't know what is. So,
That's terrific. I'm delighted to hear that.
And the other thing, the symphony performs in that afternoon as well. A small group will play Peter and the Wolf with narration twice, right? I think during the afternoon, and everybody loves to hear Peter and the Wolf.
Sure.
So, and then we have one more concert in June.
What are you going to do in your spare time?
we think up new things from our list that we figure out how to do.
Learn Wagner. There's so many. The score is so thick, even just for the violins. There's a lot of notes. So
okay, well, while you're sitting there and throwing darts at me for how much music, remember that
I love it.
I had to go through 18 hours of music to bring it down to 2 evenings.
Thank you for doing that.
But it was a huge, I had no idea when I started how huge the project was. And the idea is that when you get done with that, you can't hear the cuts. So when you go to the evening, it feels like you're seeing one opera.
Really?
Yeah.
We have overheads, so for the
Super titles.
Sorry.
Translations.
So that people can follow what's going on.
Right.
So I had to keep the story clear. I had to make sure that you couldn't hear the cuts so that you're not suddenly jolted by a key change, but that they're all very smooth going in there. And that you walk out thinking, well, that's the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, that's great.
So our final concert is a concert in the round, which is very different. We sit in the middle of Carey Hall and we put the audience around us on the stage and around us and in the balcony. And this is almost totally musicians' choice of music. So we usually feature each instrument family except for the percussion. So we'll have a string group, we'll have a woodwind group, we'll have a brass group, and we'll combine that. And this year it's called Double Trouble. So we're going to feature a few different things, but a double horn concerto or a movement from a double horn concerto, a concerto for trumpet and bassoon, which I didn't know existed, by Hindemith.
Nope.
And I don't know what else is on the program yet. That gets decided along the way.
It's the only one that we don't actually decide at the beginning of the season, and part of that is because, since it is it's probably the most creative planning section of the season that the musicians get to do. So they, as they get through the year, they come up with ideas. Gee, do you want to do this double concerto? Do you not want to do it? And do you have a better idea that I haven't thought of? And for the people who are there in the audience, one of the things that's really unique that you can't do at a normal concert is because the orchestra is not on the stage, we put the orchestra down in the audience, and then I encourage people to move around in the audience. So you may want to sit in the violin section for one piece and then move and sit in the wind section for another one. And it's a whole different energy than sitting here and seeing the orchestra out there when suddenly you're sitting next to Liz and Liz is doing this,
Yeah.
and it feels very different.
Well,
You're
I
really
would think
part of it.
so. I was going to say much more part of it.
Well, and the audience particularly loves the brass, of course.
Yeah, of
because
course.
they're so impressive to look at, make a wonderful sound. And so our most popular player, both for the kids program and for this, is our tuba player, Joby Wilson. Because he has this great big
Yeah.
shiny instrument that's
Yeah.
really loud, and he's a fun guy, and so the kids love it when Joby goes to the classrooms and when they see him on the stage.
That Julia Childs, Tubby the tuba.
Oh, Tubby the tuba. Yeah.
That was pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
I can always tell, though, what Joby has done in the schools, because when we go through that educational program, orchestrating kids through classics, at one point I always say, all the musicians who went into your schools, please stand up so that the young people can find you in the orchestra. So they all stand up, and there's Joby in the corner. And as I work through the program, very frequently as instruments are added, I'll say, and here we have a flute. Can you say, or piccolo, can you say piccolo? And that's an Italian word meaning little. And then I get to the tuba and I say, and this is, and the whole place, 800 kids going, tuba. Because that's what he does in the schools. He said, you have to say it correctly. Tuba. So
That's funny.
we know we connect.
That's funny.
And interesting to note that the high school had to purchase extra tubas over the last couple of years.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So we know that the program's having an impact.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And I'll bet the parents of the would-be tuba players are so grateful to you.
It's better than a drum set.
That's true. That's
It's
true.
better than a violin, too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Beginning violin and beginning
Oh,
oboist. Parents
nasty.
should always get a special award for that.
So if I wanted to buy, I could buy a season ticket, right?
You can buy two sorts of season tickets. You can buy what we call a Lex 4, which is September, October, February, and April. Or you can buy Lex 6, which is those 4 concerts plus the movie night and concert in the round.
Okay. And what was that phone number again?
781-523-9009.
Okay. But it's spectacular what you guys are doing. I remember when it wasn't quite as either solid and established in the community and confident about its future. That concert I mentioned, that wasn't the first year, but it certainly was second or third year. Where did this thing come from?
Well, Hisao Watanabe was the first conductor, and he got together with a few musicians who he met in his travels around the area, and my understanding is that they performed, here we have it, they performed at Leahy Clinic as the Middlesex Chamber Orchestra. And
who was he? Anyway?
Who was he? Hisao Watanabe, who came here to be a student, I believe, and was, under the tutelage of, I believe, Max Hobart, who used to be the assistant concertmaster of the BSO. And Max took him under his wing, and he wanted to form an orchestra. So they had a concert at the Leahy Clinic and then decided they needed a home and looked around the communities and decided Lexington was a fantastic place, right? It had a lot of good arts anyway to start with. And had the museum, National Heritage Museum, so that had a performance space. So he created the Lexington Sinfionietta, which is just a small symphony, which many people to this day don't say correctly. So it's the Lexington Sinfonietta from 1995 until for 10 years.
So 95 was the birthday.
95, I believe, was the first concert in the museum. And it was quite small. And, like any startup, they had corralled all their friends to come in and listen to the orchestra. And it really grew from there. When Jonathan came along in 2005 or something,
I think
the orchestra, began to grow, and so one of the first things we did was change our name because Sinfonietta just seemed a little diminutive, maybe.
I was against that too. I was wrong. That's twice.
Well,
I made a real contribution when I was at the board.
The one thing that's positive about having somebody in the midst who says, I think that's a bad idea, is that it forces everybody else to make sure they test the other side of it.
Yeah.
And that way you don't necessarily go wrong, but you should be able to make the case for it. And I think, as I recall, the case was no one can spell it, no one can pronounce it, and it sounds small.
Yeah.
And as soon as we changed our name, that's when we went into hyperdrive.
Oh, that's interesting.
We also changed venue, which you say you were against changing the name. I did not want to go to Carey. I don't know what I was thinking, because the museum had a sort of real community, closed feel to it. It was comfortable. But the acoustics for performing music were
Carey
pretty bad. And
wrong.
Carey has turned out to be a wonderful venue for us.
Well, the interesting thing for me was the first concert that I did with the Sinfionietta at the National Heritage Museum, we were sold out because it only sold, it was like 376
seats or something.
Tiny. So there was no growth potential.
Right.
And the acoustics were not good, even though the audience loved the National Heritage Museum because the seats were comfortable and they had a nice little cafe out in front.
Right.
And I remember talking to various people on the board, and probably I threw this question out to you at the time as well. Is there another venue? And everybody said, well, there's only the high school auditorium, and that's busy. No. And then somebody mentioned Carey Hall, which was almost always closed, because Carey Hall was only open for town meetings and the occasional lecture, and they said, but it's not a concert venue. And I went in with a couple of board members. We looked at the space, and I said, well, this is sort of vaguely like Faneuil Hall. There's no reason it can't be a concert venue. The stage is in the wrong place. We need to pull it forward. And from day one, when we came in there, we would put in platforms to move the stage out.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it has turned into a terrific concert venue. Spectacle management now is up to about 30 performances that they do, as well as us. And that temporary stage that we had put in is now permanent. The renovations done at Carey Hall really have brought it up to being a real centerpiece culturally for the town of Lexington. You can still have lectures, you can still have town meetings, you can still have elections in there, but now you have this mecca of entertainment that's of a wide variety between what spectacle management offers and what we offer in there as well. So, it's, in a way, it was the two sisters who left the money to build Carey Hall as a lecture hall, built it with the idea that it would really be a centerpiece, an intellectually stimulating centerpiece for the town. And we just sort of took that concept and moved it into the 21st century and said, well, part of intellectual stimulation is culture of all kinds.
And it's attractive.
It is.
Also,
beautiful.
Yeah, really looks.
Kids love coming to Carey Hall. They get very excited because it feels like they're going to a real concert hall.
Yeah.
So.
And who wants to? I mean, who needs to schlep in town and fight for a parking place at that
I know.
garage and all that kind of stuff when when you people are here?
Well, parking is easy in Lexington. It's hidden
Right.
sometimes, but it's easy. Restaurants are great.
Oh, restaurants are great.
I want to bring up one funny thing that happened this year. There was a Japanese youth orchestra who contacted us right around Wagner Part 1 time. And they were doing a concert at Symphony Hall in Boston for victims of the
The
tsunami
yeah.
victims in Japan. Anyway, we had all of these teenagers, and I said, use our setup during the afternoon, because they needed a place to rehearse, because they only got Symphony Hall once. And the acoustics being really good in Cary Hall made it an easy transition for them to go from Cary to Symphony Hall.
Mm-hmm.
I got so many comments afterwards because the kids would come into Cary from the front, and one of the unique things about Cary Hall are the paintings in the front that depict Lexington history
Oh,
and
yeah.
the Revolution. That sparked all kinds of questions. The kids, Jay Kaufman, our representative, was there to welcome them in, and he said he got all kinds of questions from these young Japanese students. What are the pictures? What do they mean? What's the story of Lexington?
There's this guy with a finger missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a plus. As I remember, Isao had this notion of working with kids, and in the early days, you were out with special
Yes.
concerts for kids, particularly disadvantaged kids, as I recall.
Yes, he went into one specific place, the Juvenile Detention Center
Right.
in Roslindale, and he
Right.
would go and take small classes there. And we went 2 or 3 times and did a whole concert in the detention center. And we subsequently did a concert in the Dorchester Theatre, the Strand Theatre,
Oh, yeah.
where they allowed some of the kids out to perform with us at the Strand Theatre. So he was very, it was very important to him to reach out to those sorts of kids.
And then he left. This has always been a combination of musicians and lay people who wouldn't, if you gave them a violin, they wouldn't know which end to stick under their chin. And there was a guy, his wife is still alive.
Yeah, Bob and Danette Morse,
Yeah.
who were good friends of Isao, and they were really instrumental in getting the Sinfonietta going. Bob did everything. And
including providing money and raising money.
yeah, and selling tickets, and it was a really
And collecting
homegrown
tickets and
collecting tickets. And sadly Bob died about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But his wife is
she
still
still
around.
comes.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest changes, really, for the orchestra. Is now we have staff, part-time staff, a number, because we've grown to the extent where we can't handle it all as volunteers.
Well, you did the bulk of it.
I did a lot.
of it.
I did a
She
lot. And then I figured I wanted to play more and do less admin.
Yeah.
Well, it gets to the point where it grows, and you've got to make a choice, because if you're there as a musician and you're killing yourself doing ticket sales, marketing, and all the other stuff in there's it's part of the evolution of an organization.
Oh, sure, and the evolution of the board. You've got a crackerjack board now. You've had some pretty good leadership on that board over the years.
We have. We have a lot of people to thank for where we are now.
Yeah.
That leadership part, I mean, it's always been they've always been people who are community minded, who are really dedicated to making sure that the orchestra was a service organization. And I think that's one key that started with Hisao, that was picked up by the board, and it's very important to me in the future too, is how can the orchestra serve the community? And board members, and this is true, I'm sure, for the National Heritage Society and the Historical Society that's here. All of these important organizations within a town like Lexington really depend on leadership on the board who balances what are we doing now with an eye on the future to make sure that the organization is going to grow, but always really evaluating, are we relevant? Are we part of what's happening? What are we doing within the community to serve, and making sure that the organization doesn't look too much internally. It's more for what you do to people who come to participate.
Yeah, and with an eye, always improving the quality of what you're doing. Well, as you know, the telephone exchange for Lexington was volunteer before we switched to digits. 86VO.
I didn't know
volunteer
that.
2192 or
Wow.
whatever.
Huh.
Remember. You've got such a rich background in music. You've done so much and been involved with so many other leading figures, which you ought to tell us something about. But what ever did this little community enterprise have that appealed to you? I mean, I could see why you appealed to us, but...
Well, even though I don't live in Lexington, I live close by. I live in Sudbury, which is very close. I was raised in the military by a father who was a chaplain in security service. So there's a very complicated background there, but it's all about service. And I went for a career in music. And I have to say, I've always had sort of a strategic plan for myself that's never worked out the way I worked it. But I think the measure of success is, do you feel like you're making a difference? Are you doing something that you are proud of? And are you serving people with what you do? And so I've always been open to opportunities that have come up along the way. And I most of my career has been as a dance conductor. And
Boston Ballet.
Boston Ballet for 27 years. And
Are you not doing that?
I have stepped down now as music
Yeah, I
director.
thought I saw something about that.
27 years, Dan. That's
Yeah.
a long time. So I'm guest conducting them this season coming up for just Le Corsaire, which is their opening season piece, the closing piece, which is Sleeping Beauty, and then I've got 12 Nutcrackers. But that means that I'm going back out on the road guest conducting in other places, so I'll be conducting with Houston Ballet and Sarasota Ballet, and I'm in talks with some of the companies that I worked with in Europe years ago and getting that all ongoing. But the thing about working with a symphony without dance is there's a whole different dynamic of both repertory but contact with musicians, because when I'm in a pit with the musicians, and Liz has been in the pit with me too, it's a very different thing. I mean, I've got part of my, maybe 25% of my attention is keeping track of what the orchestra's doing, but most of the attention is up on stage.
Yeah, right.
And when that dimension is not there, same thing in opera. It's the same kind of thing in opera. When you're just dealing with the musical end of it, there's a lot more exchange that goes on individually with musicians while you're performing, and that's what I enjoy, is that it's all communication. And so Lexington, when they were doing a conductor search, somebody had told me about it, and I put my name in the hat. And the thing that's been very special about this orchestra from the beginning, and part of that I think is its history, the fact that the musicians own the orchestra, which is very unusual in itself. But there's a different they have a stake in it. You know, they don't feel like they're always being told. They actually have a voice in what goes on. And consequently, the personality of the orchestra is very much different than in many other orchestras. You know, there's more of a collaborative feel in there, and I've enjoyed it. And getting through the musician's wish list, which we update every year, and you know, my eye is always looking to see what's going to strengthen the ties between the orchestra and the community. What are we going to do that's of value? What of the musician's wish list can I manage so that we can do those and it still makes sense within the mission of the organization?
Yeah, right.
So it's a puzzle. I like puzzles.
Yeah, yeah. And you're doing New Hampshire.
Symphony New Hampshire is, and that okay, so here's the challenge with that one. Same kind of thing. They were doing a conductor search 7 years ago, 2010. And New Hampshire was a challenge because it's a very different environment than, say, Lexington and Massachusetts. You've got a state where the population is pretty much spread out. A lot of talent, a lot of reclusive artistic people like writers and visual artists. But oddly enough, they had had a history of several professional orchestras, all of which have folded within the last 6 or 7 years. I was brought into the Nashua Symphony. We went through another name change. Nashua Symphony at the time was 89 years old.
Oh, really?
And it was sort of the poor sister. There were 3 full-sized professional orchestras, and it was always thought of as the weak sister. And all these other orchestras folded. The opera company folded. And the board hired me with the idea of taking that orchestra, improving it, and turning it into the state orchestra. And I can say now, after 6 years, that we have done that. It's a very solid organization. The name is now Symphony New Hampshire. It is the state orchestra, and it does run out concerts from its home base in Nashua to Keene, Peterborough, Lebanon, Concord, and building a real reputation for itself up there as a service organization. With we have a version up there of an educational program which is designed to do the same thing, inspire young people to pick up an instrument, and so it's a challenge.
Yeah,
it's a different challenge.
And you combined the two to do the Mahler.
We did
3 years ago.
Yep, and
that was fabulous.
That was an amazing experience, because for the Mahler we put together 3 choruses, including the Boston Children's Chorus, and the 2 orchestras, and we had 11 soloists, several of them stars from the Met. And the idea for that concert was to build an event, not just a concert, but an event, because Mahler 8, Leopold Stokowski did it with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and that was really the coming of age for Philadelphia Orchestra. It was a statement saying, here's an event.
We can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It takes a huge number of people.
Yeah.
Terry Hall was busting at the seams.
Oh, I remember.
And we blew the roof off,
Yeah.
which was very, very exciting. But, that was the first time the Boston Globe noticed us.
Yeah. They do now.
They do. We got a great review for the Wagner Part 1 of The Ring.
Good.
So, it's an interesting puzzle to see what an orchestra should do in a community today. And that's part of why I took that orchestra up there. But being able to put the 2 orchestras together, they're far enough apart that they don't compete with each other. They're close enough together that you can put them together. There are things that each orchestra has as strengths and weaknesses that offset each other, but they both learn from each other. And in the process, from the business standpoint, you can take what is a large standard orchestra size in your budget And by putting them together, you can do something that neither orchestra could achieve on their own.
Yeah.
Which to me is the definition of a good collaboration.
Yeah. Well, I just, I mean, don't bother with the BSO. You've got the Lexington Symphony, and I think we've gotten an extraordinary insider look at it and its history and its leadership and its plans for the future. And I'm sure we all wish it well, not that it needs any good wishes, because it is here to stay and here to grow and here to flourish. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Whitfield, Jonathan McPhee. Did we cover everything?